and welcome back to the channel. Today I've got my 5th build on the channel for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and today we are doing the Warlord. Welcome, I'm glad you're here. My name is Nathan, and let's dive in and talk about this. As some of you may know, Warlord is a character class from 4th edition that was not brought over to 5e. Now, it was one of my favorites. A lot of people liked it as well, and this build is going to be inspired by that one. I'm going to be attempting to recreate a character that feels similar without doing any homebrew or anything like that. And I think what I've come up with overall today, the main idea I'm presenting and some of the alternates, work quite well and should be very fun to play. So let's get right into it. Here's our agenda. We're going to do our introduction and build concept. I'll talk about level 1, levels 2 through 6, 7 through 9, 10 through 13, and 14 through 17 before summarizing. Now, I do want to say, this character build, unlike my past ones, is not going to be one optimized for damage. I will be talking about the kind of damage that they can pump out, but this character is primarily going to be a support character. And I'll talk about some of the choices you can make if you want to pump out more damage with them. Build concept. What was the 4th edition Warlord? Now, specifically, the 4th edition Warlord was the martial leader class. Now, the way that the classes worked in 4th edition, they kind of grouped the classes by power source. So you had things like arcane and divine and martial and that kind of thing. And then within each of those power sources, there were classes of there was different roles. So that there were 4 main core roles. There was Striker, which is supposed to be like a damage output type character. There was Defender, which was supposed to be kind of like a tank and protect the party. All the Defender classes had an ability that would basically let them force an enemy or heavily incentivize an enemy to attack them. There was the Controller, who was built around having like AoE and debuffs and that kind of thing. And then there was the Leader class, which was built around healing and buffing your allies. And so the Warlord falls into that category. Now, this particular character, we are going to be a heavily armored melee character with some offensive and defensive abilities. You could also play this character as a ranged build, but the concept I wanted to go for and some of the things I wanted, it really works better if you're melee. Not saying you can't do ranged, but melee generally works better in particular for this character, the one that I'm going to be building today. This is a character who's going to be able to support, buff, and protect their allies. And one of the core things that the 4th edition Warlord had that I really wanted to bring to the table here is they had abilities that would let allies make attacks on your turn. In 5th edition, this is going to be using your allies' reaction. They also had abilities to like maneuver and position their allies and all that kind of thing, and we will have those. This build will also have some burst and sustained damage capabilities based on some of the choices that you make. And again, I'm not going to be optimizing the build for that, but you're not going to be a complete slouch at the table when it comes to dealing damage. This build, you will need the player's handbook, Zenithar's Guide to Everything, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and I'm using a race from Monsters of the Multiverse. You don't have to, but I just got the book, and there's a lot of cool things in there that you can use, especially for something like this. All right, let's jump into level 1, shall we? All right, so for our starting class, we are going Fighter. I know I've been using Fighter a lot on this channel, but one of the goals I have for this character is I want to be somewhat martial. I want to have a bit of martial prowess and be somewhat martial focused. So one of those things is I really wanted to have the extra attack feature. And if you know anything about the fighter subclasses in 5th edition, you'll kind of understand why I picked this one. Why I picked fighter in general, going for some of the things that I wanted. So as a fighter at level 1, we get proficiency with heavy armor and shields, which we're going to be planning on using. We get proficiency with martial weapons, which again, I'm going to be planning on using. We're going to basically use whatever your favorite one-handed D8 weapon is, whether it's a long sword or a warhammer or like a war pick or a battle axe, whatever you want to use. We also get proficiency in strength and constitution saves, and we are going to be actually having some spell casting ability on this character. So having that Constitution save to help keep our concentration spells up is going to be really nice. Now, as for our starting race, we are going with the Hobgoblin from Monsters of the Multiverse. This is a pretty cool race, and there's a lot of reasons why I wanted it. But some of the core things that they get dark vision, like a lot of races do these days. They have a Fey ancestry, so they have, I think, advantage on saving throws against being charmed or frightened, which is nice. Now they have this ability called Fey Gift, which is the main reason I wanted this one. And this is an ability that improves at level 3. For now, this just lets us help an ally with our bonus action. So by helping an ally, we can give them advantage on an attack or something like that. You have to be standing next to the target that you want to help against. And since we're going to be melee, we are going to be doing that. Now this, we can use help as a bonus action number of times per long rest equal to our proficiency bonus. And this feature will improve at character level 3. When we take the help action, there'll be a little extra goodies on top of it. We also get the Fortune of the Many feature, which lets us, if we fail, I believe, an attack or like a saving throw or a skill check, we can add a bonus to the roll equal to the number of allies, I think, within 30 feet of us, capped at +3, that can potentially turn a failure into a success. And we can use this also a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus. I didn't take this into account into the damage calculations, but it's a great thing to have around, and this race kind of just exemplifies a lot of the things that I wanted this character to be. And you can use any race you want. Ultimately, the +2 and +1 that we get from all the new races works just fine. And if there's another race that you have that kind of fits what you want to do for your character and kind of how you see their story, feel free to take that. But I'm going to be using Hobgoblin for this build. As for stats, we were doing point buy. I am buying a 14 in strength and putting a +2 there, 14 in constitution, a 14 in wisdom, and a +1 there. We're going to be starting with a 15 wisdom, and then a 13 in charisma. There's a particular feat that I want that requires 13 charisma. You don't have to put the 13 in charisma if you don't want this feat. Later down the line, feel free to bump your wisdom up. And I have 1 point left over, and we're just putting that in intelligence. And if you wanted to do a ranged version of this build, obviously take dex instead of strength, and you'll be using medium armor instead of the heavy armor that I'm planning on using with this character. Now, as a level 1 fighter, we get a fighting style, and there are a lot of good options here depending on what you want to do. The ones that I would recommend the most on this character are going to be dueling, which gives you a +2 bonus to your damage rolls if you have a one-handed weapon in one hand and no weapons in the other hand. So a weapon and a shield qualifies for this. And then if you want to be focused on dealing damage, take that one. But the other two I want to focus on here are the interception and protection fighting styles. So the protection fighting style, the one at the bottom there, if you're carrying a shield or a martial weapon, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage when a creature within 5 feet of you makes an attack against somebody else other than you, which is nice. This can potentially help them not get hit. But the one I would actually rather use is the interception fighting style, and that's the one that I'm going to be assuming that I'm taking on this build. And what this does is when an ally is hit, you can use your reaction to reduce the damage by an amount equal to 1d10 plus your proficiency bonus. So at level 1, that's an average of 7.5 damage, 5.5 off the d10 plus 2. And you have to be using a shield or a martial weapon, and I think the ally has to be within 5 feet of you. Now, why this over protection? So when you use the protection fighting style, you have to do it before the target even makes their attack roll. So they might miss anyway. But with the interception one, especially if you have an ally with a high AC, like let's say that we are going in against, we're going into melee with our paladin or a rogue or another fighter buddy, they're probably going to have a high armor class if they're another heavily armored person. And you can use interception to reduce the damage if they get hit, rather than making them less likely to get hit when they might already not get hit anyway. So it's a matter of choice, and but I'm going to go with the interception one here. I think it's going to end up being more effective. We also get Second Wind, which lets us use a bonus action to recover an amount of hit points equal to 1d10 plus our fighter level, and that's once per short rest. Now, a quick word about this character build. Probably should have said this in the intro, but this build is going to be heavily reliant on you having at least one buddy that you can ideally go into melee with, or and especially if they don't have a good way to use their reaction, we want somebody that we can use their reaction to make attacks with. And if you don't have somebody like that in your group, I would not play this character. Like if your group is a bunch of casters and you're the only person who's going to be on the front line in melee, don't play this build. But if you've got but that said, if one of those characters is a ranged character with a weapon, like a rogue or a ranger, you actually do want to play this build because those guys don't usually get reactions, and we will be able to weaponize their reaction with our features. So, moving on, for our starting equipment, you want the items offered by your class here. So chainmail, your favorite D8 one-handed weapon, a shield, and ideally you want a holy symbol. For what we're going to be doing later, you can get this from your background or buy one with your starting gold, or acquire one, however you want. And we will have 12 hit points at first level because 10 for being a fighter plus 2 from Constitution. Now, at level 2, we are going to be taking a level in Cleric immediately here. And as a Cleric 1, we get spell casting with our Wisdom modifier. We also get ritual casting, so we can cast any spell that is has the ritual tag from our list without spending a spell slot if we do it as a ritual, as long as we have it prepared. We also get our Divine Domain here, and we are going to be taking the Order Domain, if you hadn't already guessed it. The Ordered Domain, we get proficiency with Heavy Armor, which we already had, but we also get proficiency in a skill. I think it's Persuasion or Intimidation, so pick whatever one you want. And we also get the Voice of Authority feature. So what this feature does is, it says, we invoke the power of the law to embolden an ally to attack. When we cast a spell with a first level or higher and target an ally, that ally can use their reaction immediately after the spell to make one weapon attack against a creature of your choice that you can see. And if the spell targets more than one ally, you can choose which ally gets to make the attack. So this is going to be our most reliable way to weaponize our allies. And I'll talk about this constantly throughout the build. Order clerics typically like you serve a god of law and that kind of thing. I'm thinking more of we are like under a god of war, kind of that thing, who gives orders. So we are here for the divine domain of not ordering the world, but ordering our allies around. Now we get 3 cantrips at Cleric 1, and I want guidance for the D4 to skill checks. This is a great one to have around in the party. You're just going to be saying, oh yeah, if you turn the lock counterclockwise, you might have it easier. So you're going to be providing that leadership on all these skill checks and that kind of thing. And I feel like that fits great thematically for this character, and it's very appropriate. I'm also going to take Toll the Dead. This is the best Cleric ranged damage cantrip, doing 1d12 to the target if they're damaged at base. And we actually, on this version of the build, I'm going to be pretty heavily into Wisdom, and having a good cantrip will be very useful, especially if you can't get into melee on that particular turn. And then I'm going to take the Thaumaturgy cantrip here, primarily for roleplay reasons. Just being able to make your voice super loud to give orders is going to be fantastic. Now, as a first level cleric, we have 2 spell slots at first level, and we can prepare a number of spells equal to our cleric level plus our wisdom modifier, so that's going to be 3. And we also get 2 extra from our subclass. Now, the ones that I would prepare here are going to be Bless, Healing Word, and Guiding Bolt. We also get the Command and Heroism spells always prepared from our subclass, and while these are both on the cleric list, they're great, and they're nice to have around. Now, the main spell that we're going to be using for our concentration at early levels and for a while is going to be Bless. This gives, I think, up to 4 creatures a d4 bonus to their attack rolls and saving throws. And this is a big time bonus to the party's damage. And when we cast this, we can even, let one of the allies we target make an attack immediately. So that's going to be great. Now, I did a lot of research on the best way to use Voice of Authority with Cleric spells. And the most efficient way is going to be with a spell that uses our bonus action and it can target an ally. Now, of the spells available, the best one is actually Healing Word. One of our general plans is if we want an ally to make an attack, we're going to use our bonus action to throw out a Healing Word on them, even if they don't need the health, just to get the reaction attack out of them. We're not going to be able to do this a huge amount at our low levels because, we don't have very many spell slots, but later on we will, and this will be great. But at level 3, we're going back to Fighter. One of the things I said is I wanted to have extra attack on this character, and we are going to go for it by character level 6. So these intermediate levels here are all going to be Fighter. And I'll talk about some different ways you can level the character at the end of the build, but for now, yes, we are going Fighter. So we get Action Surge at Fighter level 2. This lets us, once per short rest, just get an extra action on our turn. We can use this to potentially cast a second spell if we cast a spell with our action. So we could go action spell. Remember, the rules around spell casting are that if you make a spell if you cast a spell with your bonus action, the only spell you can cast with your action is a cantrip. But if you cast a spell with your action, you can actually cast another spell with another action. So you can spell, action, surge, spell. That is a great option to have in your pocket. And for this character, I'm going to be planning on using that to potentially just do attack with. But the flexibility of being able to cast 2 leveled spells in one turn with Action Surge can't be understated, and it's going to be really powerful. Now, at level 3, our Fey Gift feat from the feature from Hobgoblin improves. So now when we use our bonus action to help an ally, we get to choose from one of 3 options every time we do so. So we always have all 3 of these, and the 3 are Hospitality. So if we use the Hospitality help, both we ourselves and the creature that we're helping get 1d6 plus our proficiency bonus temporary hit points. That's nice. There's also the Passage option. So both us and the ally we help get a 10-foot bonus to our speed until the start of our next turn. That's great. This can potentially help our ally close the distance or get away and that kind of thing. And then there is the Spite option. So this gives, so if the person you help hits your target, that target has disadvantage on their next attack roll within 1 minute. And again, this is another reason why we didn't want the protection fighting style. We can give them disadvantage with our help Spite, which is nice. Now at level 4, we are a Fighter level 3, and we get our Martial Archetype under Fighter, and we are going Battlemaster, which some of you probably guessed if you know the Fighter class very well. We get the Combat Superiority feature, which means we get 4 superiority dice to feel our maneuvers, which are d8s, and we get 3 maneuvers. Now, there are 3 that I want here, and let's talk about them. So the first one is Commander's Strike. So what this one does is it lets you forego one of your attacks and use your bonus action to allow an ally to make an attack as a reaction. And if they hit, they get to add your superiority dice to their damage. You have to spend the superiority dice to let them make the attack to begin with. And this is the other way that we have to make allies attack on our turn. Now this one, compared to Voice of Authority, is quite expensive. At this level, it would take your action and your bonus action just to get your ally to make their attack. I would much rather, use our action to attack ourselves and then use our bonus action in a spell slot with Voice of Authority to make them attack. And this is another reason why I wanted to go to level 5, at least in Fighter, because it uses one of our attacks. So if we have the extra attack feature, we can still attack ourselves. Now, it's still going to be inferior to just using spell slots, and it's one of the reasons why I don't really like this maneuver. I think it's too expensive. But we are going to be taking it here, and it gives us more options, and importantly, our superiority dice come back on a short rest, which means we're pretty much always going to be able to pull off the Commander's Strike when necessary. So it's a good option to have in the back pocket, but mathematically, it's not as efficient as just using Voice of Authority, so you're not going to see it in the damage calculations. But it's great to have, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to be a fighter and why I thought my Warlord inspired build should be fighter. Now we also are going to be taking the distracting strike maneuver here. This one, when we hit an enemy, we can spend a superior dice to deal extra damage equal to the dice that we roll. And the next attack an ally makes against the target before, I think, the start of our next turn has advantage. This is going to be one of the big ones that we're going to be using. Our goal is, our general plan is we're going to be hitting our target and using the distracting strike on them, and then using our bonus action to make to drop a healing word on an ally with our voice of authority to make them attack with their reaction, and they'll get to attack with advantage because we distracting striked the target. Now, if you can use your bonus action in between attacks, what you can potentially do once you have extra attack is distracting strike, bonus action target an ally, and they get advantage on that attack, and then distracting strike again to give them advantage when it's actually their turn. And this is going to be very powerful. You'll burn through your superior dice pretty quickly if you're doing this, but it should be quite good and quite fun, and it's a good option to have. And finally, we're going to be taking maneuvering attack. So what this one does, similarly to distracting strike, when we hit an enemy, we can spend the dice to deal extra damage equal to the number that we rolled, and one of our allies can use their reaction, unfortunately, to, I think, move half their speed without provoking opportunity attacks. So you can use this to get an ally in or out of melee combat, and it's, again, nice to have around. We also get the Student of War feature here, which gives us proficiency in a tool and that kind of thing. Just a nice kind of... it's just a nice kind of flavor feature that the Battlemaster gets here at this point. At level 5, we are going to be a fighter level 4, and we are going to get our first ability score increase or feat. Now, we're going to be taking a half feat that bumps our wisdom, which means we get to prepare an extra cleric spell. Hooray. Now, there are 3 feats here that I'm going to recommend. You can pick whichever one you want, and it's allowed at your table. My number 1 option, if the Silvery Barb spell is allowed, is to take Fey Touched. This will give you Misty Step and like an enchantment or divination spell of your choice, and Silvery Barbs, that's a first level. And Silvery Barbs is a first level enchantment spell. So if your table allows this spell out of Strixhaven, I would absolutely take Fey Touched here. What this spell does, with your reaction, when an enemy makes like an attack roll or a saving throw, or I think even a skill check, you can force them to re-roll the dice, potentially turning success into failure. So if they like rolled a natural 20, you can be like, all right, Silvery Barbs, and then they roll a 3. And then you also get to pick an ally within range and give them advantage on like their next attack against the target. Now, this can trigger Voice of Authority, so that means that if the enemy attacks, you can Silvery Barbs them and give an ally advantage to attack all at the same time. It's insanely powerful and really good. And if allowed, absolutely take this. Now, I'm not going to assume that is allowed, so let's talk about the other options. The next option is Telekinetic. I've talked about this one in a lot of builds. This one lets you use your bonus action to push a target 5 feet in any direction, assuming they fail a save against what will be our Wisdom, 8 plus our proficiency plus our Wisdom modifier, and allies can willingly fail to save. It also gives you the Mage Hand cantrip. This one is a really nice bonus action to have to like maneuver allies, move enemies, and that kind of thing. And I've talked about it a lot in other builds, but it can be very useful to have here. Now, this character has a lot of things to do with their bonus action, so you might not get to use this very often. So it's not going to be as effective as it is going to be on some of those other builds, but if you want to do, especially if you want to do a damage per round setup with Spirit Guardians, which this character will be able to do eventually, that is a good feat to have. But the one that I'm going to be assuming that we're using here is actually the Telepathic feat, which is going to be a first one I've used on this channel. What this one does, in addition to giving you the attribute bonus, it lets us, we can communicate telepathically with any creature within 60 feet of us, and they can understand us so long as we share a language. It also gives us the Detect Thought spell, which is kind of a nice utility thing. But the cool thing here is, I think we have to be able to see the targets that we use telepathic with. But this means that even if it's super loud and chaotic in a battle, or someone has cast a silent spell, or you need to be sneaky, your allies will still be able to hear you because you can talk in their heads. And I think they can respond and that kind of thing, because you can basically hear their thoughts with this. So super cool, super thematic, and very flavorful. And this is what I'm going to be taking here. I think it would be a load of fun to have this. And yeah. But again, if your table allows silvery barbs, mechanically Fey Touch to get it is the best thing that you can do. So take that if you want to do that. And if you want to do damage per round with Spirit Guardians, take Telekinetic. Finally, at level 6, we are a Fighter 5, and we get extra attack, which means now we can attack twice instead of once when we take the attack action on our turn. Importantly, with Commander Strike, this means that we can attack, sacrifice one of our attacks and our bonus action to use our Commander Strike to let an ally attack. So now that option is available. It's not the best. It's still really expensive compared to just Voice of Authority and tapping someone with a healing word to let them attack, but it's now available and we can still attack. All right. Now, normally with most characters that I've presented up to this point, we would do a damage report here at level 6. But instead, we're going to do a tactics report because this character is support-oriented, and while they can output some damage, and I will give you numbers, this character is not optimized to do damage. So, we do have an ability to do some burst here. So, when we want to do burst damage, we would use our bonus action to help an ally, giving them advantage, and then we would cast Bless, and we would make sure to target that ally that you help with Bless, and they can use their reaction to make an attack with advantage. Great. In round 2 or later, we are going to attack with our Distracting or Maneuvering Strike twice, Action Surge, and attack with our Maneuvering Strike twice, and use our bonus action Healing Word to target our best martial ally, who then can make their reaction attack with advantage. This burns through all of your dice and one of your spell slots, which is almost all of your resources. And unless you really need to do burst damage, this probably isn't the best thing to do. But when we do this, kind of what are we capable of? So we have 4 attacks, each doing 2d8 plus 3 damage. One of those is d8s is from our weapon. The other one is from our superiority dice, which we're spending all of them. And then we have Bless, so that's our d4 plus 6. Now, as for our ally, when I crunched these numbers, I assumed that we had my baseline crossbow expert fighter. So at this level, that character has Hex cast, and they're using sharpshooter with the archery fighting style. So that character would do 2d6 plus 13 with a 1d4 plus 3 to hit with sharpshooter on with advantage. And that means that against a target with an armor class of 10 and plus 0 to their saves, we would be doing 67.5 damage on average using our ally's reaction. And against an enemy with an AC of 15 or plus 5 to their save, we would be doing 53.7 damage on average. And this is actually pretty darn respectable for this level. And at this level, this character actually is a pretty good burst damage dealer. Now, we're not really going to be focusing on this, and it's not really going to improve much. I will still kind of report the numbers, but it's not going to be like one of the things that this character focuses on. And as for that buddy, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But the best thing that you can have for your buddy that you're going to be using to make attacks is actually a rogue. Because rogues normally, the cool thing about rogue is rogues can use their sneak attack once per turn, not once per their turn. So if they have a way to use their reaction to attack on someone else's turn, they can potentially sneak attack again. So if we have a rogue buddy and we give them advantage with our Distracting Strike and then command them to attack, they'll be able to use their sneak attack on that reaction attack. So if you have a friend who's playing a rogue in your campaign, they will love you, and this build pairs extremely well with a rogue, whether it's a melee or a ranged rogue. You also pair well with like that ranged sharpshooter character, whether they're a ranger or a rogue or a fighter. You pair pretty well with them. And again, you also pair pretty well with a melee. So long as you have one of those characters making weapon attacks in your party, this character is great to have around. Now, for some of our other tactics, we have 3 uses of Fey Gift here with our bonus action to help our allies to get advantage. We have 2 spell slots we can use with Voice of Authority. Our main spell we want to be using here is Bless, which takes our action, and we have also Healing Word to tap allies with the bonus action to make them attack. We will be getting a lot more spell slots later, and right now this isn't super effective. We also have our 4 maneuvers. We have our Commander's Strike, which costs one of our attacks and a bonus action. And we have our Distracting Strike and our Maneuvering Strike to give our allies advantage and position them and that kind of thing. Fortunately for us, we get back all of our superiority dice on a short rest. So Commander's Strike is probably going to be what you're going to be using the most often if you can't chain together fights. So like I said, even though it's expensive, it's good to have around for what this character does. Our interception fighting style at this level will reduce damage by 1d10 plus 3, and it's a great way to protect our allies. Now, moving on to level 7, we're going to take a departure from fighter now that we have our martial kind of prowess established, and we are going to turn heavily onto our cleric. Now, a level 2 cleric gets channel divinity, and all clerics get turn undead, which basically forces undead to make a save or be turned, and then they have to run away. We also get the unique order cleric channel divinity called Order's Demand. What this one does is we can exert an intimidating presence, and as an action we present our holy symbol, and each creature of our choice that can see or hear us within 30 feet must succeed on a wisdom save or be charmed by us until the end of our next turn or until they take any damage. And we can also force any of the people that we charm to drop whatever they're holding. So this is a nice thing to just like immobilize our enemies, make them drop their weapons with our, powerful authority. It's good, but the one we're probably going to be using the most here is Harness Divine Power. Now, this is actually a separate feature from Channel Divinity. Your Channel Divinity charges come back on a short rest, but you can only Harness Divine Power once per long rest at this level. And what this does is we can expend a use of our Channel Divinity to recover a spell slot of a level equal to half of our proficiency bonus rounded up, so to level 2 at this level or lower. So this is basically an extra spell slot, and we're probably going to be using this feature to recover spell slots, and then we'll probably use Order's Demand once we recharge our Channel Divinity on a short rest. Now, as a second level cleric, we get an additional first level spell slot for a total of 3, and we can prepare 5 cleric spells. We're still at first level spells. Prepare whatever you want. Again, Bless and Healing Word are our main ones, but Shield of Faith is a good option to have here to boost an ally's AC or your own. And again, you can also give them that bonus action attack. I think Sanctuary is also a first level spell and is also good here. Now at level 8, we're going to be a Cleric 3. We get second level spells at this level, 2 slots for them, and we get our next round of domain spells. So there are a lot of good second level spells. The main ones, well, there's a lot of good ones here, including Aid, which boosts the health of the party. Fantastic thing to have. You probably want to cast this basically as soon as you finish your long rest. You've got Enhance Ability, which you can give an ally or yourself advantage on skill checks of a certain type. So you can boost the face of the party with their charisma skills, or help your exploration character with their perception and survival, or help your best investigator with that kind of thing. Great thing to have around, especially for those out of combat situations. You've also got things like Lesser Restoration and Warding Bond. These are all good spells. Just make sure that you prepare probably Aid and then your Bless and Healing Word at this level. And we also get Hold a Person and Zone of Truth always prepared from our Cleric subclass. Now both these spells are on the Cleric list, but having them always prepared means that you can prepare better things. And Hold Person in particular here can be really, really good to paralyze an enemy and lock them down and give your allies and yourself automatic crits against them. Now it only works on humanoids, but it's a great thing, again, to have around. At level 9, we are a Cleric 4, and we get our second ability score increase or feat. And I'm going to take the Inspiring Leader feat here. This is the reason I got that 13 in Charisma way up there. And again, if you don't want this feat, balance out your stats a little differently, probably boost your wisdom. But what this does is after a 10-minute speech, and each creature can only benefit from this once per short rest, up to 6 creatures within 30 feet of you, including yourself, that could see or hear you throughout the speech and understand you, get temporary hit points equal to your character level plus your charisma, and this will be 10 points currently. Now the cool thing is here, if we took the telepathic feat, We could give a telepathic inspiring speech. So let's say that your party is about to sneak in and you got to be quiet. You could do this silently. And I think that's just really cool. But the main reason that we want this is this is just a big boost to the party's overall survivability. If you combine this with aid, we're going to be increasing the health of the entire party by 15. And that's pretty significant at this level. That's about a 20% increase. If we look at our health, it's about 72 at this point, and you assume somebody has about 75 health, that would boost them up to 90. And you can do this every short rest, and so you guys are going to be constantly flush with all of these temporary hit points. Now, as a 4th level cleric, we get another cantrip. I'd probably take Word of Radiance here, just to kind of be a melee cantrip if you need it, and keep preparing whatever spells you want. Again, focus on the best ones. But at level 9, it's time for our next tactics report. What have we gotten since last time? We now have 7 total spell slots, including some, and we have 2nd level spells at this point. We've gotten a lot of support and control spells. We have Inspiring Leader, and we've got our Channel Divinity up. Our burst plan is pretty much the same. We'll use our bonus action to help our ally, cast Bless, and then use our action surge and dump all of our dice and attack, and then target our best martial ally. And the damage here hasn't really increased. It's only increased by about 1 or 2 points. But again, we're not focusing on the damage. And when you need to burst with this character, it's still going to be there. But the main thing that you want to do with this character is protect and buff your allies and enable your best martial character to do more damage by weaponizing their reaction with our Voice of Authority or your Commander Strike feature. We want to be standing on the front lines with which very likely should be plate at this point, with our plate armor and our shield and our weapon. And we are going to be putting out a little bit of damage ourselves, but really enabling our allies to succeed. As for our options, we can use our Fake Gift 4 times per long rest now, which is great. We now have 7 spell slots to use with our Voice of Authority, so we're going to be able to make those reaction attacks a lot more consistently. We still have all of our maneuvers, and our interception has gotten a little better. We've added some key spells like Aid and Warding Bond. Importantly, Warding Bond, it'll basically make you and the person you want to buff share damage. And you can use this really well, especially if you've got a squishy, high damage ally. You can make them a lot tougher because you basically combine your hit point pools. And then our Inspiring Leader here is 10 temporary hit points, which is great. Now, at level 10, we're going to continue in Cleric. We get Destroy Undead of a CR 1/2 or less. So if we turn a low CR Undead with our Channel Divinity, they just go poop and die. Great. But importantly here, we get 3rd level spells. There are a lot of good ones here. Some of the highlights that Clerics get at level 3 include things like Spirit Guardians, Revivify, Animate Dead, and that kind of thing. Spirit Guardians is a really good damage per round spell, and I would probably use it here for your concentration instead of Bless. We're not primarily focusing on this, but it'll boost our damage a little bit. And from our subclass spells, we get Mass Healing Word and, unique to Order Clerics, Slow. Slow is an incredibly good control spell. It lets you pick up to 6 enemies, and they get like a -2 to their AC, and their speed is halved. And I think they can take an action or a bonus action on their turn and not both. And then if they can make an attack on their turn, they can only make 1, even if they have the multi-attack feature. If they cast a spell, it potentially might take 2 turns to go off instead of 1. This is an incredibly powerful control spell, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to invest this many levels in Cleric. And it's actually going to be one of the reasons why I'm going to be boosting my Wisdom later on with this build. At level 11, we are going to be a Cleric 6, and we get Channel Divinity, which we can now use twice per rest, so our Channel Divinity improves. And we also get Embodiment of the Law. This is the Order Cleric 6th level feature. What this does is number of times per short rest equal to your Wisdom modifier, which is 3. When we cast a spell from the Enchantment School, we can cast it with a bonus action instead of a full action. Some of the main highlights here are Command, Hold Person, and Slow. And there are more available, but these are some of the best. And this feature is one of the reasons, again, why I wanted to go this deep into Cleric on this version of the build. Being able to cast Slow as a bonus action and then make your attacks, or cast Hold Person as a bonus action and get crits yourself with your superiority dice, it's actually really good. And being able to cast these spells with a bonus action is going to give us a lot of flexibility and a lot of power. There's also some good enchantment spells that you can target your allies with as a bonus action. And again, this feature is fantastic. Our cantrip power goes up here at character level 11, and we get an extra 3rd level slot. Again, prepare what you want. Importantly, we also get 2 uses of our Harness Divine Power per long rest here. So that's 2 spell slots that we can get back, potentially of 2nd level or lower. So that just boosts our overall spell arsenal that we can use to make those Voice of Authority bonus action attacks. At level 12, we are going to continue in Cleric to Cleric level 7. This gives us more domain spells and a 4th level spell slot. Some of the highlights off the Cleric list here include Banishment, which can noble an enemy away as long as you can concentrate, and Death Ward, which protects gives an ally a measure of protection from death. And from our class spells, we get Compulsion and Locate Creature. Compulsion is another enchantment spell. This one is normally unique to bards, and clerics can, and only order clerics can get it among clerics. And Locate Creature is on all the cleric lists, but we can prepare it uniquely here, so we don't have to worry about preparing it with our other things. Compulsion, you can basically make enemies move in a direction of your choice, but it takes an action to cast and then a bonus action to make them move on their turn. This movement can provoke opportunity attacks, and this is a good option to have. It's probably not as good control as something like slow, especially because the enemies won't willingly walk into dangerous hazards like off cliffs or into fires and that kind of thing. But if you have a lot of melee allies, you can use this to get a lot of opportunity attacks. At level 13, we are going to continue in Cleric, and we get another ability score increase or feat. I'm actually going to take Warcaster here to fortify our constitution, let us potentially attack with a spell like Word of Radiance when an enemy provokes an opportunity attack from us. You don't have to take this here. If you want to focus on your melee damage, you could absolutely bump Strength, or you could bump your Wisdom if you were focusing more kind of on your damage per round with something like Spirit Guardians and you took Telekinetic. But I'm going to take Warcaster here. It also makes it easier for us to cast certain spells because we're holding our sword and our shield. And so being spells that didn't have a material component requirement and were just vocal and somatic, we would have to mess with what we're holding to be able to cast. And with Warcaster, we wouldn't have to do that. But this does give us advantage on our concentration checks, which is very, very nice. Our Destroy Undead improves here to a CR of 1, and we get the Blessed Strikes feature out of Tasha's. So I'm going to be using this to replace our Order Cleric one. The Order Cleric one only applies on weapon attacks and does psychic damage. And the Order Cleric capstone at level 17 requires you to have that feature, but we're not taking Order Cleric that high, and so we don't need that particular feature. Now, Blessed Strikes lets us add a D8 of radiant damage when we damage an enemy with a cantrip or a melee weapon attack once on each of our turns. So the nice thing here is this works on cantrips and weapon attacks as opposed to the base version that we would get from our subclass, which only works on attacks. So it gives us a little more flexibility there, especially if you're going to be leaning more into doing cantrips, or if you want to be able to do cantrips or attacks, which is what I want to do on this character. So level 13, it's time for our next tactics report. What has changed since last time? We now have 4th level spells and slots. We have 12 total spell slots, and we can potentially boost that up to 14, but with our Harness Divine Power. Those spell slots, importantly, can be 3rd level or lower at this point. We have Blessed Strikes to add that D8 of radiant damage to our weapon attacks or our cantrips. We've got our Embodiment of the Law feature, so we can cast those enchantment spells as bonus actions. We've gotten a whole bunch of strong control and utility spells, especially given that we have that Embodiment of the Law feature. And again, our Harness Divine Power here is we can use twice, and we can get 3rd level spells or less, twice per long rest. So, tactics options. I'm going to talk about some of the things you can do here. So we can focus on being a frontline damage output character using Spirit Guardians. That is one option. We can potentially do a lot of single target burst against a humanoid by casting Hold Person on them. We have the ability to do control with slow or compulsion. And finally, we can do our general enhancement case with bless. So the highest damage thing here is actually that frontline damage output, both for burst and sustain. So let's talk about how much burst damage that can do. So we would now use our bonus action to help our ally and cast Spirit Guardians at level 4 in round 1, and then we would do our same kind of attack, action surge, attack, bonus action, healing word, make ally attack. So we now have one of our attacks has 3d8 because it has the radiant damage. Our others are still 2d8. And our ally baseline, again, hasn't really improved significantly, but we've got our Spirit Guardians going with 48 on a save DC of 16. So against an enemy with an armor class of 10 and plus 0 to their saves, we do 90.1 damage on our burst round. And against an enemy with an AC of 17 and plus 7 to their saves, it would be 64.4. That's a pretty significant increase from last time, considering last time we only got 1.5 points. That's 21 damage against low armor class and 10, well, 9 against the higher. But again, we are not built for burst damage, and while I'm happy to be able to do some damage here, the main thing that this character is going to be providing, again, is that control, those buffs, and making our best allies better. As for our our things that we've got going, we can use Fey Gift 5 times now. We have 12, potentially 14 spell slots to use with Voice of Authority. We've got our 4 maneuvers. We've got our interception is 1d10 plus 5. We've got our full suite of cleric buff spells, and our inspiring leader is 14 temporary hit points. We are this fantastic leader of our party who can help everybody out, and I'm really happy with that. Now, level 14, I'm actually going to go back to fighter here. There's been an ability score increase or feat just sitting here, and we're going to take it now for +2 wisdom, bumping it to 18. And again, if you wanted to focus more on martial damage output, I would be bumping strength instead. If you want to focus more on your damage per round with Spirit Guardians and you have telekinetic, you would have probably bumped wisdom earlier. This lets us prepare another cleric spell. Cool. But at level 15, we're going to jump back to cleric. For cleric 9, I really wanted the 5th level spell slot and the 5th level prepared spells. This gives us things like Greater Restoration and Raise Dead off the cleric list, which are great. And then order clerics always get Commune, which is a ritual, importantly, so you can cast it without spending a spell slot. Lets you ask your god questions. And you get Dominate Person, which lets you basically mind control a humanoid. This is potentially better than Hold Person because you can get them on your side. But you want to make sure you cast this like with an ambush kind of a deal, because if you cast it during combat, they have advantage on their save against it, so that's not the best. But this also gives us a 5th level spell slot to cast Spirit Guardians with if you're going with that kind of damage per round plan, which is nice. But at level 16, we're going back to fighter. We get to learn 2 more maneuvers here. Kind of pick whatever you want. We also get another superiority dice here, and we get a nice ribbon feature in the Know Your Enemy, which lets us kind of inspect an enemy and learn things about them, like if they have any class levels and that kind of thing. Finally, at level 17, we're taking a level 8 in fighter, and we're going to bump our wisdom up to 20 on this build. Again, if you want to be martial damage focused, bump your strength. And if you are that Spirit Guardians damage per round focused, you are probably going to already have your wisdom 20 at this point. Importantly, our cantrip power goes up at cleric level 17, and we can prepare another spell because we have that +2 wisdom. All right, for our final tactics report, what has changed since last time? We have 5th level spell slots. We have 14 total spell slots. Potentially, we can boost this up to 16 with our Harness Divine Power. We have 20 wisdom. We've gotten more strong control and utility spells. We've gotten additional superiority dice and additional maneuvers, just to kind of add to our flexibility. Our tactics, again, mainly this is what we want to use our concentration for, and these are our options haven't really changed. If you want to do frontline damage output, you're going to be using Spirit Guardians. If you want to do single target burst on a humanoid, you're going to Hold Person them. For control, we've got Slow, Compulsion, or Dominate Person here. And our general enhancement case, again, is Bless. The nice thing about that is it uses a very low level spell slot, especially if you're almost out of spell slots. That's a good way to go. Our burst plan, again, we can now cast Spirit Guardians at level 5, do the same thing. And our save DC has gone up 3 points since last time, which is actually really nice. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to boost Wisdom with those last levels, is just to make things like Slow and Spirit Guardians that much more effective. And we do a little bit more damage here. It's nothing too significant. And again, we're not built for burst damage, so it's not really that big of a deal. We can use Fey Gift 6 times now to help allies as a bonus action. We have 14 plus 2 for a total of 16 potential uses of Voice of Authority. We've got 5 superiority dice to fuel our maneuvers with. Our interception is 1d10 plus 6. We've got all our cleric buff spells, and our inspiring leader is 18 temporary hit points at this level. And overall, yeah, I'm very happy with where we arrived at. We managed to build kind of a successful half caster with Cleric and Fighter that has the extra attack feature. All right, so to summarize, what is the overall score for this character? Now, to calculate this, I just took the burst damage numbers at all of our tactics reports and averaged them, and this is a 70.1. But there's a big asterisk here. This is obviously the worst burst damage character I've ever built to this point, but the big asterisk here is this character wasn't optimized for burst damage. I wanted to do a little bit of math just to kind of see what they were capable of, but again, we didn't build them for this. Now, if I was going to take this build to character level 20, you've got a couple choices. Fighter 11 for the third attack is within reach. Alternatively, Cleric 12 for another ability score increase and more spell slots and that kind of thing is also within reach. I would actually go Cleric 12 on this version of the build, primarily because I didn't focus on strength or any kind of things that would enhance my melee damage output. So yeah, I would do Cleric 12 on this version of the build. Now, that said, you've got a lot of options here whether you want to focus on your spell casting or martial ability, and let's talk about those. So if you wanted to focus more heavily on being a caster here, I would do Fighter 3 and Cleric 14 for your 17 level split. This gives you a lot more Cleric spell slots, and while we don't have that extra attack, we still have the maneuvers, which we can kind of use as our short rests fuel. If you're going to do this, I would probably do the feats very similar to the one that we did here, but you might want to, I would probably even consider starting with a 15 strength and not really making attacks with weapons and just relying on cantrips here. On that 15 strength will let you use heavy armor, and then our wisdom could be boosted a lot higher and sooner. Yeah, so that's what I would do if we want to lean heavier into the caster. You'll get better spell slots and higher level spells. You might want to get telekinetic to do that kind of Spirit Guardians DPR, which I've done with the last 2 character builds, and this would be the third if you did it that way. Now, if you wanted to go heavier into martial, I would go Fighter 11 and Cleric 6 for our split. Importantly, this would give us that Embodiment of the Law feature to be able to bonus action cast enchantment spells, as well as 3rd level spells, but we'd have those 3 attacks from Fighter. Now, if you wanted to do this, you're going to be a bigger damage dealer yourself. So I'd probably get either the dueling fighting style or use a 2-handed weapon, like a greatsword. And I would actually run the Spirit Shroud spell. Clerics do have access to this spell. That would add a d8 to all of your weapon attacks. So potentially 6d8 for a 3rd level spell slot in a burst round if you attacked, action surge, and attacked again. Yeah, that's a lot of damage, and while this version is more selfish, if you want to be a better damage dealer in terms of burst, that's probably the way to go. And you also have pretty good sustained damage because you have 3 attacks per turn. And if you're going this version, you're going to want to, you're probably going to be ignoring your wisdom to some extent, probably leaving it at 16 and getting your strength to 20 as soon as possible. Now, I do want to talk about doing a shillelagh version of this character because this kind of solves the little bit of multiple ability score dependentness that this character has. Now for this version, I would probably go Fighter 11, Cleric 6. This kind of gives you the best of both worlds in terms of you've got the 3 attacks per turn, but you're also going to have the 3rd level Cleric spells and the Embodiment of the Law. Now, how do we get shillelagh? So we are going to be using custom lineage and getting Magic Initiate in Druid. This gives us a couple of Druid cantrips, probably like Thorn Whip and Shillelagh. Shillelagh lets us attack with our Wisdom by like enhancing a magic staff. So you'd use a quarterstaff and a shield. And for our stats here, we'd be doing a spread kind of like this one that you see here. So 8 strength, 14 dex, 13 con, 9 intelligence, and a 15 plus 2 wisdom with 13 charisma. If you don't want the Inspiring Leader feat, then make your Constitution higher. You could potentially, you potentially don't need Inspiring Leader on this version of the build, but if you want it, these are the stats I would use. You're going to be using a medium armor and a shield here because we don't have the strength to use heavy armor, unless you want to play a dwarf, but we're not going to do being a dwarf because we're custom lineage. Now, we're going to take a Wisdom half feat here. Again, top choice is Fey Touched for Silvery Barbs if allowed. but otherwise take telekinetic or telepathic. You're going to take +2 whiz to bump your wisdom to 20. You'll probably take inspiring leader, and you might take resilient constitution, and consider starting as a cleric. So that way you don't have to worry about the martial, like the fighter stuff, in terms of like the saving throw proficiencies. And the cool thing about this is this makes a single ability score dependent in our wisdom. So we can attack with our wisdom, our spells will be cast with our wisdom, and overall this might be a better version of the build. But you don't get to be a hobgoblin, which is really unfortunate because the hobgoblin is really cool and thematic for this character. Now there is another option I want to talk about here, and that's actually being a ranger instead of a fighter. And this lets you use hobgoblin. I would do a ranger 5 and cleric 12. And the cool thing here is at level 2 ranger, you can take the druidic fighting style, which gives you a couple cleric cantrips, so you can get Shillelagh from here. I would probably go Fey Wanderer for your Ranger subclass. This lets you add your Wisdom modifier to certain Charisma checks, and overall I think would fit really well. And yeah, you would take the same feats and kind of use the same, the stats for the Ranger version are now on the screen, so I would do a +1 con and a +2 whiz, and you take that Wisdom half feat, +2 Wisdom, Inspiring Leader, and then probably get Warcaster. And this might be able to, I'll talk more about later. Ranger and Cleric are a very interesting multi-class build, but this build does not give you those superiority dice to do the Commander Strike and other things that I feel is core to kind of replicating the experience of the 4th edition Warlord. So, yeah, that is the build for this week. I hope you are inspired, and you know, Warlord was one of my favorite classes from 4th edition, and I'm really proud of how this build kind of exemplifies everything that was cool about that class. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Again, my name is Nathan, and I hope to see you next time.